And now we are going to be getting into today's topic, right? It's
Dun, dun,
called
dun.
what is it called, Nick?
It is called the Monolingual States of America.
What's that?
I feel so like scholarly saying that. Like I came up with that title for the segment, thinking that I was like, and I came up with, I was like, dang, like I'm smart. With in reality,
I'm smart.
we all know how that is, Derek. It's just not true. Anyways,
Oh man.
I'm gonna ride this wave of confidence into this segment, but essentially, what we're gonna be talking about is why don't Americans learn other languages? Why is this trend not really a thing? And I just want to say too, we're only going to be making observations here. We're not going to be criticizing the United States. We're not going to be criticizing Americans. We're just going to be talking about the trends that we've noticed and we've experienced and seen in this country, and just identifying them and talking about them because it's pretty interesting to us. So, and one more disclaimer too: when we say Americans, we obviously fully know that America is a set of two continents. You know, it's
Or
more than
one,
just the United
depending on your
States.
geography professor, or if you're from the US, maybe you didn't have a geography professor, but anyways.
You know, exactly. But regardless, the America is not just the United States, and we recognize that. It's just saying in the English language, when you refer to someone from the United States, we say American because United
Mhm.
Statesian is not a word, even though in
It is in
Spanish it
Spanish
is.
though,
Yeah, it is in Spanish.
and that's the great thing about it, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, we don't have that word in English, unfortunately. But yeah,
Um,
we use the word American as kind of shorthand, just to not say someone from the United States. It's, you know, 3 words shorter to say American.
we
So
should start saying United Statesian, don't you think?
might catch on.
Or like you shorten it to like Statesian,
You never know.
or you could say statesman. Why is the statesman? That's a word.
Statesman, I feel like that would work.
Honestly, it has a good ring to
Um,
it.
yeah.
Anyways, we're getting carried away again. So I'm going to start us off with a statistic, Derek, and I'm going to have you analyze this and kind of have this lead into our reason number one behind we see the reason why we see this trend. So let's look at the continent of Europe. Obviously, a big collection of countries there, huge melting pot of cultures. 56% of European citizens speak more than two languages. Only
There's
20% of Americans speak more than one language.
that's yeah, no, that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the reason, like, if we're trying to guess why this is, right? So the U.S. and Europe have a lot of similarities in the sense that they also have very few things in common. One of the things they do have in common is the way that the U.S. is structured and divided and whatever you want to call it into states, right? Europe is like that, but with countries. So instead of everyone speaking one language, right? Um, there are all these different languages, and if you're a citizen of the European Union, you can travel from one country to another pretty much the same way that you would travel from one state to another domestically inside of the US. And it's pretty crazy. Most of the countries aren't massive. If we look at Spain, it has 40 million people or 45 million or something like that. It's really not that big. Um, for some perspective, the US has 338 million, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so it makes sense that, like, there are some similarities between countries in Europe and states in the US, right? Um, Another fun fact that we're gonna have many fun facts. It's gonna be a theme. It's gonna be a theme. Fun fact of the episode, aka every 5 minutes. Um, the
I
U.S.
think our viewers are going to live for our fun facts, 100%.
I hope so. I hope so. We're all learning things today, right? So the U.S. makes up 4.2% of the world's population, and that's pretty crazy, right? Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's nothing else to say about that.
And I think when you compare it to, like, if you were to ask some Americans, like, what percent of the population do you think we really consist of? I think it might guess a little bit higher.
Oh, definitely would. Because I
And
think we all know that
another,
there's like a 7-8 billion people on Earth, but I feel like we have this perception that the US makes up so much more of the world, right?
Exactly. And kind of going off of that reason number one too, like what you were talking about, Derek, and this isn't the fault of Americans, I would say. It's, the difference between Europe and the United States, because it's just the way that the continent is, these regions are divided up. If you drive 4 hours from Madrid, you just drive 4 hours east, you're across the Pyrenees and in France. And it's a completely different set of cultures and a different set of language. Like, you're forced to speak that language when you're there. Obviously, you can get by, but if you go to live there, like you said, you can travel within the European Union without restrictions. There's a lot more business interactions. You go on holiday. There's just a lot more opportunities to go between countries. Whereas the United States, if we're in San Diego and we drive 4 hours east, probably around 4 hours, we're just about in Arizona. About like Yuma, maybe, or if you drive 4 hours north, we're in San Luis Obispo. We're still in California. We're not like barely halfway through California.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And while San Luis Obispo is a different town than San Diego, you're not going to drive and be like, wow, this is, there's different language,
Yeah.
There's a completely different set of cultures here. It's still the United States. Or if you hop on a plane and fly 4 hours east, you'd be in Chicago, which, Chicago's different than California, but again, same language, it's still America. So I think just the existence of different countries, the way Europe is, it's the way the continent was developed, all these different sets of languages and cultures, and the development of the Latin language, like all the Romance languages, the way they developed, and the different empires and the different, kingdoms and stuff all throughout Europe, the different countries, it's just the way the continent is developed, and it's just the way it is. So we're not going to criticize America for that, but I'm saying that's one of the reasons, I would say, why a lot of Americans don't speak as many languages as Europeans do.
Yeah. And didn't you have another fun fact to share with us about the official language of the US?
Oh, that's right. So even though a lot of Americans speak other languages, fun fact number two, according to the Constitution of the United States, shout out my AP government teacher senior year, he was amazing. There is no official language in the United States. English is not the official language. Even though it is, it's not. If that makes sense.
It's officially unofficial, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like we're not establishing a whole lot of credibility here, but you just got to trust us. It is, but it's not. Like, obviously,
they can Google it.
Yeah. Technically speaking, there's no official language of the United States. So with that being said, and I feel like the way that the founding fathers kind of had in mind was, there should be multiple languages spoken in the country, which, because it's all about, the freedom of speech and stuff like that. And I think that it would be really cool in an ideal utopian dystopian future where, people in the United States spoke multiple languages. There were, not just English. I think that would be really cool. But I'm getting a little too idealistic here.
Yeah, I guess our last point on reason one is just that, for example, if you're in Europe and you're growing up in Europe, you're forced to encounter a lot of different languages, right? Whether you travel, for example, someone in California might go on vacation to a different part of California, or they might go to Florida or whatever, right? But I guess it's not as common for someone to leave the US. Sure, it happens. But or someone from another part of the US might come to California for vacation or whatever, right? If you're in Europe, there's a good chance that if you're going on vacation, you're going to a different country, and you're going to be forced, at least to an extent, to speak that language. Or if you want to move to another country, like Nick said, you're going to need to speak that language. You're not going to move to France and just refuse to speak French, right? That's just not going to happen. So yeah, and it's just the way the world ended up, and it's just the way the US is set up and the way Europe set up, But anyways, I think that kind of brings us into reason number two.
Reason number two is this is an interesting one, and it's got a good side and a bad side. It's like when someone tells you like, give me the good news or the bad news. So I'm going to start off with the good news. I'm going to go a little bit off the radar here because I know a lot of people usually like the bad news first. I know I do. Anyways, first off, the good part about this is that Americans are very proud. There's a lot of patriots in this country, which, patriotism, national pride. I love my country. I totally support that. Like, I'm all for it. It's great. But on one other hand, sometimes Americans, I feel like, can be a little bit too prideful and be a little bit too proud of their country. And the fact that it's like, okay, America this, America that, like other countries don't exist. And they don't take the time to, even open their minds to learning about another country. And with that comes a lot of bad things. I feel like comes a lot of negative stereotypes, a lot of just bad attitudes towards people, and that can cause conflict.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and exactly like Nick said, English is the most widely spoken language here, and therefore, when people come to the U.S., they're kind of expected to learn English, right? And granted, they should. They're coming to the U.S., they should learn English to at some point, right? But I do think that as I guess a collective of the United States, we could do a better job. If someone comes here, and the fact that it's very unlikely that someone speaks their language, is going to make it so much harder for them. And maybe if one of their neighbors already spoke their language and English, that could help them, so much at the beginning or whatever. You just think of like, oh, you're going to like buy a house or buy a car or something like that, and not speaking the language like that, that's almost impossible, and you're probably going to get ripped off. But, so yeah, a lot of people move to the US for the quality of life, and they want to learn English too, because it's becoming a more global language, right? But I guess the question that we're asking is, as Americans, why can't we also learn their languages? Like, would that be so bad? The US is a beautiful melting point, and like we said, there's no official language here.
Yeah, and I think another interesting trend too, and going off of English being a global language, is Americans obviously know that. So obviously you can't fault Americans for expecting people to learn English when they move to the United States. It happens with any country.
Mhm.
But also with that comes too, we know the fact that English is the most widely spoken language across the world. So if we go internationally, if we go on vacation, I feel like there's an assumption that people are just gonna be able to speak English too.
Yeah. No, and although it's not the most, I think in terms of native speakers, I'm pretty sure Mandarin still has a
Mhm.
leg up by by a good bit, but it is the most learned second language, right? So most people learn English as a second language kind of thing. So I guess that's kind of what we meant. Did you have anything else here, or did you want to go right on into reason number 3, because it's kind of connected, right?
Yeah, they're kind of simple. We can honestly can morph these two together, but our reason 3, like we said, lack of recognition of other cultures. And like we talked about earlier, just these negative stereotypes that exist of the outside world.
Mhm.
And especially with that American pride, a lot of times I feel like Americans think they live in a bubble, it's like, because it's so big, obviously, it's like, oh yeah, you go to Texas, that's a different culture than California, which yeah, it is, it's a different culture, but at the end of the day, it's still American per se. And that's the
Mhm.
most like intercultural experiences you'll get in America. I feel like a lot of the times with people is going from state to state, which yes, there are some cultural differences, but there's really not a whole lot. And I think the experiences that people get going from the United States to Mexico or to other countries all around the world are a lot more transformative. And I think with those experiences, yeah, obviously Americans go to Mexico, but what do the majority of Americans go to Mexico for? It's
Party.
spring break. Let's
Yeah.
go to Senior Frogs and let's knock down some margaritas. Let's go, let's go to Rosarito. Let's go to Cabo. Like, that's not really Mexico. That's just like, that's scratching the surface of what they actually, their culture is. And I think if more people, like with that, I think a lot of those go into these negative stereotypes, like we said, oh, Mexico is this place to go down and party, or it's Central America is a dump. It's not really safe unless you go to those resort towns. When in reality, that's not their culture. Like, you go to Mexico City or you go inland, you go to a true like a Mexican town, that's not a whole lot of tourists. Even so, like, or even just going to talk to the people who are working at those resorts, it's going to open up your mind to so many different things and realize how beautiful and amazing the people and the cultures are of these countries.
Yeah. And that's the thing. This pride that we have as Americans, it's a double-edged sword. That was the way you put it the other day, right? We
Mhm.
were kind of preparing this. And having patriotism is great. It's absolutely fantastic. It's very important for a country. The bad thing is when we tune out and even maybe degrade the outside world, right? That's kind of the bad part. And we do it. It's something that we do as Americans. And like we said, we're not trying to badmouth Americans. We are both Americans. We've been American our entire life. Um, and I guess we're just trying to bring some awareness, really, because we've seen it. But yeah, getting into some of the stereotypes, I've heard a whole bunch. I'm sure you have too, Nick, and I'm sure anyone that's listening or watching this has also heard a whole bunch. I know you kind of touched on a couple. One that I've heard, for example, is if you go to like Colombia, right, that you have to be careful because they'll put cocaine in your suitcase because of Pablo Escobar. And it's just that one kind of like irritates me a little bit because I have some friends from Colombia, and they're some of the nicest people I've ever met. Um, and it's just, I guess, trying to reduce a whole country's history into one historical figure, whether that figure is good or bad is just impossible. Just try to reduce the US, and it can be someone good or it could be someone bad. And it just doesn't work, right? And it just ignores so much important stuff. But yeah, I've also heard like that if you go to China, they're just going to be eating takeout food, right? And there's just busy cities and gross streets. There are busy cities and gross streets everywhere. And like in Brazil, for example, there's a whole bunch. In my hometown of São Paulo, like there's a whole bunch. But you go to New York, that's just like that. It's the same thing. And then talking about like how like Latin America is dangerous or whatever. There are parts of the US that are also very dangerous. So obviously it's like no place is going to be perfect. No place is just going to be, and it's hard to say if one place is completely more dangerous than another, but just saying, oh, it's so dangerous down there is just, you're overlooking a lot of things, really.
No, you really are. And like you said, there's bad parts of every single country. There's negative aspects of every single country. But I think this is kind of like a life philosophy that I have too. It's just like not dwelling on the negative things. Like life's too short, start focus on the things that really make you happy and that just fill your life with positivity because life's too short. Why not live it as happy as you possibly can? I know it's easier said than done, but I always just try to focus on the positive things. And I think if more people looked on the positive side of these countries, like, okay, stop dwelling on the fact that it's potentially dangerous and look past that. Like, look past the busy streets and the gross buildings, whatever. Like, and there's beauty there. And there are people and there's a culture and there's a whole set of history and traditions that created those things. And looking beyond just those shallow, superficial things in every country is amazingly unique and different in their own way. And the heart and soul of every country and every culture is the people. Because let's face it, without the people, there would be no country, there would be no culture, there would be nothing. And the people that we have met, and we've seen this with our own eyes, the people we've met from all over the world, and not just with Spanish, like through other apps where we help other people with English. Like I've talked to people from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, this in English, and obviously in Spanish too, from Costa Rica, from Spain, from Colombia, from Peru, from Chile, like all these different places. Being able to connect with people around the globe is something that is so life-changing and so mind-boggling and just like completely changes your mind and opens your mind to so many different things. It's unbelievable. And I think that experience goes even deeper when it comes to languages. Like, talking to someone from Egypt and, Palestine or wherever in the Middle East, connecting with them in English, it's so unbelievable. It's so an unbelievable feeling. And it's something that's super exciting. But when you can do that in their native language, when you're the one speaking their language, that feeling is unbelievable. It's literally like the keys to opening up a completely new world. You're like literally opening the doors to an idea. And like I've experienced that feeling so many times, even just like talking for an hour and a half or 2 hours with my language partner in Spain, just about like Spanish politics and Spanish government, which I never thought I'd be interested in. But like just the fact that I'm doing it and their language and learning about his country and his set of cultures. And it's unbelievable. And Derek, I think you always tell me this quote about languages. What is it again?
So it's from the great Nelson Mandela, right? And I might be slightly wrong, but the general idea will still be here. And it's if you speak to a man in a language he understands, it goes to his head. But if you speak to a man in his language, it goes to his heart, right? So I think kind of breaking that down, it can be understood, but it's a whole different level when you speak it to them in their language. It goes to the heart, right? Like it really goes to heart, and it shows that you're going out of your way, right? And we both had plenty of experiences where we tried talking to someone in English or whatever, and maybe they have a hard time expressing themselves in English, so we ask if they prefer to speak in Spanish, and that changes everything, right? It changes their whole demeanor. Maybe they were super shy and quiet or whatever in English, and out of nowhere in Spanish, they're super extroverted, they're outgoing, they're warm, welcoming, they might even hug you. Everything's possible kind of thing. But it just goes such a long way, because if you're the one that is, I guess, uncomfortable in a social situation, you're talking to someone, you're uncomfortable, it's hard to express yourself, right? It's hard. So if you put that other person in the position of being, I guess, in control and in comfort, it allows them to open up so much more. Right. And especially because it shows that you're okay with being uncomfortable as long as it makes them more comfortable. Right. And I think you said, like, I don't know if you want to share some of your experiences, like, from over the summer.
Yeah. So over the summer, I worked as a server at a hotel pool, and it was a timeshare. And so, yeah, a lot of people coming in from all over the US because it was a domestic, it was like a domestic company. It was Hilton. Anyways, there was one day where I met these two guys and I was serving them, and I heard them talking in Spanish. And it's always awkward, like when you hear someone talking in Spanish and then our eyes, they light up and like, oh, we want to get in this conversation. Like I started talking to him and I was like, oh, where are you guys from? And like, oh, we're from Colombia. And the other guy said, oh, I'm from Chile. And I was like, ah, pues hablan español. And they did a double take and they were like, what in the world? And I kid you not, it was literally like a switch turned on inside of them. Like I literally just flipped the switch. And these guys were just going on and on and on and on, and just talking about their countries and the love that they have for them, and teaching me slang. And I talked to them for like 30, 45 minutes. I clocked out way later than I should have, and I probably got a penalty for it. Anyways, but I was just so like into the conversation. It was so amazing. And at the end of the conversation, he gave me his contact info. He's like, if you ever come to Colombia, just let me know. We got a place to stay. Like, just the things that people do when you speak in their native language. And I think a lot of it too is with Americans. I think a lot of the times any Spanish speaker, when they hear an American speaking Spanish, like especially us, like and me in particular, I am, for anyone who doesn't know what I look like, I am tall, blonde, 6'6" with blue eyes, and speak like a Californian, as you guys can probably tell. I don't really fit the profile of a Spanish speaker. So when somebody, finds out that I speak Spanish, and it's happened multiple times, people are shocked. And obviously that's not the main reason why I learned Spanish, but it's always just like a little bonus once in a while, where you're like, dang, like that reaction was awesome. Like, it's kind of like, I guess not a reward per se, but it's kind of like someone recognizing like, okay, like that's awesome, man. Like all the work that we've put in to improve our Spanish, like that's being recognized, which is cool once in a while, obviously. And we don't want to get too overconfident with it and stuff like that. But just overall, being able to talk to somebody in their own language completely changes their personality and their own dynamic.
Yeah, no, it goes a long way. It goes a long way, and I guess kind of talking about some more of the stereotypes and misconceptions, and this will kind of lead into our next reason. But in the same way that, like, here in the US, we have all these stereotypes, most of them unfortunate, right, about these other countries, right? Some of which we've kind of mentioned and we don't need to repeat. Outside of the US, one of the misconceptions is that Americans don't care about other cultures. Americans don't want to learn other languages. There's some truth to it, So I think, especially like as an American, if you put yourself in that position to learn another language and put yourself in that position to speak in that person's language, it just goes such a long way. Like it's really just ridiculous, right? Like we said, it changes everything, right? So yeah, and I guess getting into reason four, it's kind of misconceptions. You want to take this one away?
Yeah, we're not going to go fully in depth here because, like we said, this is going to be a full episode in itself. We're going to get fired up. It's going to be another one of those open heart hours, as I declared earlier. But yeah, we feel like, especially in the United States, I mean, obviously around the world, there's language misconceptions, but especially in the United States, exists a lot of them about learning languages. For example, I'm only going to scratch the surface here, but a lot of times, I've heard things like, oh, like I've taken 3 years of high school Spanish, I'm fluent. Or what's the point in learning another language when we only speak English in the United States? So on and so on. We've already got them laid out there. We've probably got like 5 or 6 of them. Anyways,
Oh, yeah.
just a lot of misconceptions about language learning that might discourage other people from learning languages. And in general, and especially in America too, we feel like the language system, the way they're taught in schools, isn't broken per se, but should be improved. And not just in the US, but around the world.
Yeah.
And like we scratched upon earlier, learning a language is not just learning grammar and reading literature and studying vocab. Because yeah, you're getting all the building blocks, you're getting all the things, but now you got to go out and do it. You don't do that in the classroom. You got to step outside the classroom and actually speak with natives and learn learn the actual language itself. And we feel like in the United States, it's not really stressed. You don't really hear that in your classes. It's always just like, okay, well, here's this, go on Quizlet, study your Quizlet, study your flashcards. We're learning about the subjunctive today. But I'm getting a little bit too in depth here, but essentially those are our reasons 4 and 5, just the language misconceptions and the broken language systems in schools, which prohibits and discourages students from learning languages.